Welcome to Three Questions With. I'm Hugo, publisher of the Latino News Network and your host. Three Questions With is a public affairs program elevating the voices and visibility of matters most important to the Hispanic-Latino community by speaking with community and industry thought leaders on the social determinants of health and democracy. The number of Hispanic-Latino adults 65 plus has grown nearly 3 times since the year 2000 to approximately 5 million in 2020. For the community, taking care of their elders is often part of the cultural fabric. We take care of our own. Caregiving is an investment in time and money that can be a strain, especially if you're juggling not only taking care of seniors, but children and all the responsibilities that come along with it, including housing, food, and health care. AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering Americans 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. Alvaro Obregon is the Associate State Director, Advocacy and Outreach with AARP Illinois. He is our guest today. Alvaro, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Hugo. Buenos días.
Now, let's start with the great work that AARP Illinois leads. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't know, who AARP is. They've heard the name, but they're not sure, probably because we do so many things. In the state of Illinois, we have 1.7 million members. In the city of Chicago, we've got about over 200,000 members, so we're really a statewide organization, and we're part of a much larger nationwide organization. And we focus on issues that affect older adults, 50 plus, and their families. So, sometimes people think like, oh, they only take care of one small segment, but we really take care and advocate on behalf of whole families, right? And we work on issues such as long-term care, Social Security, financial security, and 2 issues that I hope we talk about today, that are really important is, caregiving, but another one is broadband, right? We call it high-speed internet, and it's often referred to as broadband, and that's such an important issue. If the pandemic showed us anything, is how reliable we are. So it's no longer a luxury. It's something that's absolutely needed. And what's happening right now, what has happened is that there's this incredible funding that's coming from the federal government. And it's a once in a generation, maybe more, but literally billions of dollars are going to flow to all of the states. And at the end of last year, there were these digital equity plans that were developed. Illinois did one, and I'm happy to say that AARP reviewed all of them across the country, and we have one of the best in the whole nation. So what we have to do now is really look at how is that money going to really flow into areas so that we can bridge the digital divide, right? There's the infrastructure question, but even beyond infrastructure, there has to be things like digital literacy, getting devices into people's hands. There's that part, that education component, and really across age groups, right? It's not just the school children, right? It's also, there are a lot of middle-aged adults, and there's a lot of older adults that may not be proficient in knowing how to use different devices. They may not have a computer. You and I probably have several emails that we'd love to give away, and others don't even have anything as simple as an email. So all this funding is coming down from the federal government, and I think it's really important that we pay attention and make sure that it goes to places that it needs to go to, into neighborhoods that it needs to go to, particularly communities of color. It needs to go there. And one example of how something that helped me shift the way that I was looking at it was in a conversation that I was having. Someone pointed out that 100 years ago, the people who had running water were the haves. The first people to have electricity were the haves. And so it really, it was very striking of the haves and the have-nots. And when we look at broadband, when we look at high-speed internet, it's somewhat of a similar situation. So we have an opportunity to begin to bridge that digital divide. And we're at the forefront on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great analogy in regards to running water. Closing the digital gap is not a nice to have; it's a need to have. And as you mentioned during the pandemic, we just saw just how important that is, from education to work. To healthcare, and the Latino community and other marginalized communities were at a disadvantage. I agree with you. One of the concerns that I have is it's wonderful to see such huge numbers of investment in closing the gap, but it's really important to see where those dollars are being invested. We mentioned off camera about the rollout of the vaccination, where almost a year after the pandemic started, the vaccinations weren't going to the people who needed it the most, beginning with Latinos and the Black community. When it comes to the funding that's coming, is there a particular emphasis, hope that AARP is looking for in regards to the rollout of some of these programs?
Yes, absolutely. So we're working very closely with the Illinois Office of Broadband at the state of Illinois, right? And there's this initiative called the Illinois Broadband Lab that's made, the partners are, the state of Illinois, as well as the University of Illinois and several other entities across the state. And they're doing a wonderful job. So we're ensuring that older adults, especially, are heard and get to determine where some of that funding will end up going, and also, as I mentioned, communities of color, because in communities of color, Latinos, the Black community, we're intergenerational households, right? We all live together, so what affects one affects everybody. And so what has just happened, literally, I was in Philadelphia a week and a half ago. I was at a conference, 1,300 people across the country working on this question of digital equity, and very powerful. And the state of Illinois, during the conference, had just finished putting forward their final plan. Now, remember that as I mentioned, that we have one of the best draft plans, but AARP took a look at it, and we gave them still even more recommendations on how to make it better. They now submitted it to the federal government. The federal government will review it, and I have no doubt that that money will begin to come down. But it's going to be important to be in touch with entities like AARP, who are on the ground and working with folks, as well as paying attention to that question of high-speed internet, of broadband, because it's so important.
Great. Well, certainly count on Illinois Latino News to continue following the story and partner in reaching the community. You mentioned AARP and 50 plus. As the Latino community continues to age and mature, the services that AARP provides, including not just information, but education, is so important. Let's move to the second topic, which is about caregiving. An AARP report found that while caregiving can be financially, emotionally stressful, Latino caregivers often experience higher financial strain. What can you tell us about the resources available to Latino caregivers, many of them who are juggling caregiving for their elders as well as their children?
Yeah, so that one is so near and dear to my heart, Hugo, because I'm a caregiver, and I take care of my mom, who's 92 years old, and my uncle, who's 85. They live with me, right? And that's how we as Latinos live, right? And one of the biggest hurdles is not even knowing that you're a caregiver. I mean, honestly, when I started at AARP several years ago, I heard the word caregiver, and I thought it was just a caretaker, somebody who gets paid to, and what I did was just being Alvaro, the son, right? I was just being Alvaro, yeah, the son who took care of, his mom, his tia, his tío. But that's perhaps for the Latino community in particular, the first hurdle that we just don't identify ourselves as caregivers. But then, if we're juggling, either a job and a family, or if we're juggling two jobs, it just puts that financial strain on the caregiver, but also obviously on the family by extension. In our research shows that there are about 1.29 million caregivers in the state of Illinois. And think about this statistic. So there's 1 in 7 Illinoisans are caregivers. A large part of those are people of color, right? And the hours and the care, if you translated the amount of hours that they are putting in, if you then, add in, what that would cost the state if caregivers were not providing that care, that comes out to about $21 billion in care. Unpaid, mind you, right? So imagine if all caregivers suddenly said, I can't, care for my family anymore. It would probably collapse the health industry in the state of Illinois and across the country, really. And so it's those types of things that are important to know, because of the importance of caregiving as a role, right? Now, in terms of the Latino community, one of the things that when I started was I took a look and I said, there are not many resources out there to the Latino community in Spanish, right, in our language. And in a previous, in my previous life, I remember, we'd go to conferences with folks, and there was never anything in Spanish, never, but they were there for the numbers, right? Because somebody was counting the numbers of folks. So what we did was we brought together community partners such as Alivio Medical Center, such as Casa Central, Rush Alzheimer's Disease Center, Sinai Institute, Catholic Charities, and we formed a committee that was going to put together a conference, and we called it Caminando Juntos. That, to my knowledge, it's the only caregiving conference, at least in the region, that is all in Spanish, 100% in Spanish. All the workshops in Spanish, the information that we give out in Spanish. But here's a great point about that conference is that we don't turn anybody away. So we actually have translators. So if you speak English and you don't speak Spanish, it's okay. You can still come to our conference, only the script is flipped. Now you have to put on the headphones, but that's okay. And we've done that for this will be our 7th year, and October 5th. This will be our 7th year, and we're very proud of that because we're bringing resources to Latino caregivers, to bilingual caregivers, to Spanish-speaking caregivers, so that they know what to do, because caregiving could be one of the most stressful things you can do. And we're also working on some legislation that will create, it's called Pathways to Care. So what it is, it will create within the Illinois Department on Aging a portal, a one-stop shop, if you will, with all these resources. Because imagine that at the time, lots of things are coming down at you. You're taking care of a loved one. They're very sick. You have to often make decisions on the fly. You've got, if you have the luxury and, if something bad happens and you have the luxury, it's you might have 2 days. Oftentimes it may be less than that. And currently in the state of Illinois, there is no one-stop shop of information for caregivers. And so we're really working with legislators to create this Pathways to Care portal. And it'll be in multiple languages. So it'll be obviously in English, but it'll also be something that folks, if they speak Spanish or another language, will be able to access. And that's going to be a huge step forward for caregivers in the state of Illinois.
That's great. As you've mentioned, sometimes language is such a huge barrier in order to get the resources, to get information, education that empowers the community to act. And as you've mentioned, of course, our community is largely, they're living in multi-generational households, making decisions together, and having that resource of providing information in English and Spanish to help them have those discussions, prepare for what comes next in regards to la tercera edad. Their golden years is so important. We've been talking to Alvaro Obregon, Associate State Director of Advocacy and Outreach with AARP Illinois. When we come back, this native resident of Pilsen will tell us a little bit more about what drives him to lead the work that he does.
Hello, I'm Kimberly Loftus. On the next edition of In the Money, we'll discuss the economy, how to protect and grow your money in a roller coaster economy with my guests Emerson Duyan and Tamara Durbin.
Because debt is a detractor from you building wealth.
Join the conversation Thursday at 7 p.m. on CAN-TV Cable Channel 19 or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN-TV Plus app. Experience the power of community television.
We've been talking to Alvaro Obregon, Associate State Director of Advocacy and Outreach with AARP Illinois, about caregiving and about the importance of closing the digital divide. Now we're going to learn a little bit more about you. You grew up in Pilsen. Tell us about your upbringing and how that's influenced the work that you lead with AARP.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me again. So I grew up in Pilsen. I live in the same house that I moved to when I was 1 year old. So born, raised in Pilsen. The furthest I've ever moved is from the first floor to the third floor. So Pilsen is a great place. I mean, I went to school there. I still live there, as I mentioned, and live in a great, live in a neighborhood that is full of the culture. That's what motivates me to keep going. When I walk down the street and I go to the store, when I walk to the train to get to work, when I say hi to my neighbors, I look at all of them, and I've been lucky. I feel blessed to be where I'm at and to do the work that I've been doing, and I feel something inside of me that is a duty. I owe everything to my community. And I will always put my community first. And, so that's really what motivates me. And I look at my mom, she stopped going to school. I had to drop out of school at 8 years old to start taking care of her siblings because she was the oldest girl. And I look at her now, she's 92, and I see everything that she's given for her family, for her brothers and sisters, and for me, and that's what gives me energy. I learned everything to give everything of oneself from my mother, and to her is who I owe just a wealth of gratitude and helping the average folk. I love walking down the street and the fact that the vendor who's selling paletas knows my name, and if I don't, even if it's not something that's related to my work, but if somebody asks me something, I don't know, but I'll find out, and the next time I see you, I'll give you that information. So it's really my community, Hugo. It's a great community. It continues to be a great community. Some say it's a community in transition, but it's been in transition for a long time. We were the first Mexican family on our block, so yeah.
You've seen a lot of change in those years.
Absolutely.
You mentioned previously that you're a caregiver, but you didn't know you were a caregiver. You mentioned, your mother, 92 years young, and the responsibility of being the oldest at 8 years old and making tough decisions that because of her, and I have a similar story, we didn't have to make those types of decisions coming up. In regard to being a caregiver and the work that you do with AARP, for a lot of us, right, that are starting to work with our parents about su tercera edad and what that looks like, any advice as both working at AARP but also as a caregiver with your mother and your uncle, what advice can you give someone as they're preparing to be a caregiver?
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of asking those questions. Some things are in our culture are taboo, right? But end of life is often case a taboo subject. It's something that we don't want to think about. Perhaps it's because we love so hard, right? That we don't want to realize that cycle will that's part of the cycle of life. But asking questions, looking for information, preparing oneself, right? Even before, if possible, right? We have to prepare ourselves as well. We're in a position where we can find information. However, the day will come when someone may need to take care of us. And so how do we prepare to make it easier for the next generation so that they don't have to struggle as much as we might be struggling ourselves. So ask a lot of questions and really be compassionate. It's very difficult. Trust me. I took care of my aunt until she passed away 5.5 years ago. So I've been the default caregiver for the family. But I take that role on and I embrace it because I know that it is filled with love. And I'm giving back just a fraction of the love that was given to me when I was growing up.
That's beautiful. And I think those lived experiences is what you're bringing to AARP Illinois that's really helping not just the Latino community, but all communities. Alvaro, you've been so generous with your time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Hugo.
This week on Change Agents, we will meet some leaders who are passionate about educating and empowering our refugee youth right here in Chicago.
There's no limitations here once you get here. And even if your parents didn't have the opportunity, now you can do what they didn't do.
Join me this Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on CAN TV 19, stream us live on cantv.org, or watch us on the CAN TV Plus app. Experience the power of community television.
And now, la última palabra, the last word on caregiving. Caregivers play a crucial role in our society by providing essential support and assistance to individuals who are unable to care for themselves. Whether it be children, individuals with disabilities, or the elderly, caregivers are there to offer physical, emotional, and sometimes even financial support to those in need. The number of Hispanic adults 65 and older has nearly tripled since 2000 to about 5 million in 2020. By 2060, that number is projected to quadruple, according to American Heart Association News. The U.S. Latino community faces unique challenges when it comes to caring for older family members. Latino caregivers are on average 43 years old, younger than other racial and ethnic groups, according to a National Alliance for Caregiving report. Typically, the person they care for is about 67 years old with more than one medical condition. Caregiving in the U.S. 2020 revealed that Hispanic caregivers experience some financial impacts more often than non-Hispanic whites, such as having issues paying bills or expenses. On average, caregivers spend about 24 hours a week providing care, with 1 in 3 providing care for 21 hours or more, and 1 in 5 providing care for 41 plus hours, the equivalent of a full-time, unpaid job, reports AARP. While for many Hispanic Latino people in the U.S., caregiving is a natural part of family life, a cultural norm, research suggests that sense of familism may be fading as younger generations become more acculturated. Millennials, of which nearly 15 million are Latino, are being forced to grow up and face the ultimate adulting choice: have children or take care of their parents. Many are foregoing parenthood to accommodate the needs or future needs of their parents, reports Annabel Rocha with Wrecking News. In September 2023, 66% of adults said that grown children should have a great or fair amount of responsibility in caring for their elderly parents. Juggling the responsibilities of caregiving and work is a tightrope for Latino caregivers, says Maria Aranda, Executive Director of the Edward R. Roybal Institute on Aging at the University of Southern California, Susan Dworek School of Social Work. Many Latinos are simultaneously caring for children under 18 and therefore face the compound challenges of sandwich caregiver. The challenges are plenty. The high cultural commitment to caregiving among Hispanic caregivers may force them to neglect their own health, placing them at risk of isolation and mental health strain. Caregiving can be overwhelming for those providing and receiving it. This is why it is imperative that the necessary support be available. The Diverse Elders Coalition includes these recommendations for organizations focusing on advancing family caregiving. 1. Use community leaders to recruit and deliver comprehensive programming. 2. Offer information in Spanish and English to effectively reach Latinos. Develop translated, culturally competent, in-office and online materials to provide information and caregiver training. And 3. Virtual events such as webinars, which are dedicated to empowering caregivers and older adults by connecting them with experts from the aging field to work towards solutions that address their specific needs. For Latinos, choosing to live in multi-generational situations is often mutually beneficial to all, making elder care more manageable and reflecting the profound significance of familial ties. And that does it for this edition of 3 Questions With, a collaboration by Illinois Latino News and CAN TV. LNN is dedicated to best serving Hispanic Latinos with local multimedia news and information websites across the U.S., including Illinois Latino News, a statewide community-focused initiative. I invite you to look us up on our websites and chat with us via social media. Tell us what you think about the topics we talked about today, and please send me suggestions about what you think we should talk about in the future. Because at the Latino News Network, you're more than just our audience. You are our contributors. I'm Hugo. Thank you all for watching.